when you look at a company, it's important to look at, okay, the website's great, the mobile app is easy to use, but is there a paradigm shift in the the underlying, operational infrastructure, right? That allows this business to scale exponentially. It's hard to find those companies.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Andrew Borovsky. Andrew has a unique approach to fintech and real estate, having founded Visible, and he also had leadership roles at Cash App, Square, and Apple. And he is currently a founder and CEO at Rent App, which is an innovative tech app for people paying rent. So, Andrew, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. My pleasure too. So I believe that we will have a very interesting conversation on the topic of risk management, specifically in property transactions, what you do, and fintech or PropTech, how you call it. But before that, could you tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now, and what you guys at Rent up to this day?
Oh boy, that's I'm gonna have to make it really fast. Yeah, I've been in tech for almost 25 years now. I started my career as in product design in San Francisco, working for a company, kind of old company that people might remember from .com era called Macromedia. Macromedia built sort of premier web development technologies at the time and was acquired by Adobe. So I ended up through that acquisition working at Adobe, kind of spearheading the transition of Creative Suite from CD to online to Creative Cloud. From there, I went on to Apple, worked for a couple of years, kind of most notably on the second iPhone, which is iPhone 3G, transitioning that to the cloud as well. And then in 2008, decided to start my own company with a few friends. 4 years later, we sold that company to Square, also out in San Francisco. But by then, we had opened an office in New York, so we were based in New York and became Square's New York outpost. That was my foray into fintech and kind of money flows. In 2015, I left Square to join a company called Cadre, which is a tech-enabled real estate private equity firm that offered access to high sort of high quality commercial assets to everyday sort of investors. And that was my kind of deep dive into both private equity, but also kind of getting into the asset management side of things beyond just money movement. After Cadre, I actually went back to Square, which by now had split almost into two companies, Square and Cash App. Spent 2 years at Cash App as head of product design. And then 2 years ago, left to start my own company called Rent App, which is basically the way to think about it is sort of like Cash App, but specifically for rent, right? So you look at Cash App and Venmo, two sort of main peer-to-peer money transfer platforms in the United States. They're really great at paying back a friend for lunch. They're not really well equipped to do business transactions, quite expensive to use for business transactions. And rent is a business transaction where when you collect rent, you're collecting income. And so Rent App's really focused on money movement for the purposes of collecting rent. And in the United States, that really entails, overcoming issues around, for example, limits. So you can spend lots of money, right? Because rent tends to be in the thousands of dollars. Also cost of sending money. We're a free platform, which is also somewhat unusual. And it's a very secure way to move money from person to person. Again, when you're talking about very large sums of money, a free platform, you're inviting a lot of risk, essentially. And so we've built some technologies that make it, safe for a renter and a landlord to transact. But maybe I'll pause there.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic! Wow. So you're a young person and have so many roles and jobs you have taken.
I'm almost 45. I don't know if I'm a young person.
Yeah, I think for visually you are younger. But let's go deeper in the.
It's AI filters.
All right. I wish I had the same filters as you. So, can you tell us what are the most common risks that you're discussing? We're discussing this prop. What are the most common risks that property buyers and sellers should they be aware of during transaction? Maybe what your app is solving the best.
Well, I'll probably say, I mean, there's some risk around buying and selling, and then there's risk around, renting, specifically. Yeah, I think on the buying and selling side, it's mostly pretty safe. I mean, I think the biggest thing you come across very frequently is title, right? So, United States, you spend a lot of money doing title search, and then you spend a lot of money doing title insurance. These things are not really very common in Europe,
No.
or versions of it. And that really has to do with the fact that the United States is a very decentralized place. The states sort of were added as the country moved west. And so you had lots of different systems for registering real estate on a county by county basis, not even state by state basis, which means that, to identify the owner of a piece of real estate in the United States is much more complicated. There's no centralized database that tells you,
Mhm.
okay, here's the address, who owns it. Um, so it's a little bit of work there. And because of the fact that in the event that you buy a piece of property from someone that doesn't own it, that's devastating, right? You could send millions of dollars to somebody and then they pretend to be the owner, and then it turns out that there's some
Yeah.
other owner. And I'm oversimplifying. It's rarely that complicated, but sorry, rarely that simple. It's usually something along the lines of there is another owner that maybe still owns a piece of it, some years back, and then there's like a little bit of a conflict. It's usually quite complicated. But at this stage, I would say, people dole over thousands of dollars for title insurance, because it's so scary, but the risk is very low. So title insurance is a very good business for the insurance companies, because they can predict that risk pretty easily. So it doesn't happen as much. I think there's a lot of things that can happen on the contractual side of things, right? So you need to have a good lawyer. When you put down a down payment, it needs to go into escrow. All those things are sort of part of. I mean, again, it's pretty automated these days. But for example, 2, 3 years ago, when there was a huge rush of buying of real estate in the US, right, on the back of COVID, or really everywhere,
Mhm.
what you had is very fast deals being done. And that fast deals with sort of like you wire the money to some account, there's a contract, and hey, this place is going to be yours. Like, do you want this place really quickly? Cool, sign this and wire a deposit to this address, right? And what might happen is they might do that with a couple of different people. And then when it comes to actually time to actually do the transaction, you find out there's multiple people bidding on the same property. It gets quite complicated. I think with rent, the most common thing is somebody pretending to be a renter, or most often somebody pretending to be a landlord. So I'll tell you like the nightmare scenario, and it's nightmare because it's so easy to do. Would be somebody. I'm gonna pretend to be a landlord, so I'm gonna pretend to own an apartment, and I might list it. And by the way, whether you do this on Airbnb or on apartments.com, it almost doesn't matter. But if you think about it, like go out there and try and list a property on Airbnb. It's incredibly easy. I mean, you can do it in
Yeah.
under 5 minutes. I can find an address. I can take pictures of it. I mean, you don't even have to give them an address. Take pictures of it, post on a website, post a listing, ask people to send me deposits, for a place. Airbnb now has insurance and all these other things, but you take something like, again, things like apartment.com. The typical thing is, I'm looking for a place in New York. Oh my God, this apartment is beautiful and it's so cheap, right? So you send a message and they say, yes, the apartment's still available. There's 10 people that want to look at it. If you send me a deposit today, I'll reserve the apartment for you, right? So you do it very quickly without even looking at the place, without meeting the owner. A lot of times, they'll use Zelle or again, Cash App or PayPal. You send $1,000 to hold this apartment. And then it turns out this is not an actual landlord; it's a fake landlord, and they collected a deposit for a fake property that's not even theirs to rent out. It's extremely easy to lose like $1,000 that way,
Mhm.
which if you're somebody looking for an apartment, you're a younger person, $1,000 like devastating, right? You might not be able to get another apartment. But it's very, very easy to do. And if you use a platform like Zelle, for example, it's virtual or crypto, virtually, you can't get it back. Like it's done. So I think these are the kinds of things you come across most often. So people impersonating one or the other side of the transaction.
Mhm. So how can these risks be mitigated early in the process, or technically, how can you do this?
I mean, talking about rent specifically, it's very important to verify that the person owns the property. And and there's ways to do that. I mean, I think a lot of people have been asking for a title check. So I'm kind of connecting the two industries together. So you could savvy renters are, hey, can you give me proof that you own this property? Um, I think that's really key. I think the ability to meet the person ahead of time. You could deposit a check because you can pull back a check, versus like a Zelle where you can't, get it back. So yeah, it's sort of like doing your research on the person, and then using methods of payment that are revocable.
Mhm. Interesting. So, and how does market volatility impact strategies in real estate transaction? Because I know, for example, that there are some issues with Florida condos sometimes, and then another period there are some California. So, how are you country-wise or a specific market?
No, we're countrywide. I mean, I think on a rental side, the nice thing about the rental business is pretty Um, it's pretty insulated from market cycles. Like somebody has
Um,
to rent somewhere, and somebody always has something to rent out. I think prices fluctuate as a result, but I think the number of transactions don't really change all that much. Um, I mean, look, in markets that are very, very hot, again, you take something like New York, trying to find a place in New York is always a nightmare, right? This is something that
mhm,
everyone dreads. You have an influx of like millions of people a year. So, it's their scarcity around affordable, attractive places to live. In the case of New York, it's apartments. And so it's very easy to play on the kind of FOMO, right?
mhm,
Of renters where you go, look, this place is again, if it's too good to be true, it's usually not true, right? So, at times when there's huge influx of people to New York, I mean, a good example of something like a place like New York and a lot of big cities that are adjacent to universities, like, there's a lot of folks that enter New York in say August, right? August,
mhm,
September, are typically the hottest rent months. So yeah, like you'll see dozens of people fighting for a single apartment. um I mean, it's a tale as old as time. I think if again, I'm dating myself a little bit, but if you think about these classic New York shows like Seinfeld and
mhm,
Friends, I mean, there's probably several episodes dedicated to just them trying to find an apartment. It's just like such a quintessential New York problem. And a lot of the stories around that have to do with like the things you will do to get a good apartment, right? And so in situations where you're desperate to, you know, own something, you will make mistakes. That's where risk is highest.
mhm. So, how can technology like AI and data analytics improve the strategies, better risk management strategies in property
Well, they make
transactions?
they make it harder actually. I think with the problem is with both those things in terms of stolen identities. So it's easier to impersonate a person
Hmm.
than ever before, because there's more access, on the dark web to people's identities, right? Every time a bank
Oh,
leak
yeah.
leaks a bunch of, there's a big, big, big leak of personal data from a bank. There's a audience of people around the world. Looking to buy those identities, and then the first thing they do is they engage in what looks like legitimate business in the United States because it's just such a wealthy country. And then I think AI, AI makes it even harder because one of the
Hmm.
cheap ways in which people mitigated that risk used to be identity verification, and
Yeah.
specifically identity verification through selfie and so liveness check, and being able to upload your documents. And as we all know now, is it's possible to pass a test um, through like an AI generated, image, right? So I don't have to look like what I look like right now. So, I think lots of companies in this space are focused on this. This is not just PropTech or Fintech. This is just
Yeah.
universal. It's very, very easy to impersonate. It's never been easier to impersonate yourself online. Or impersonate someone else, I should say. So I think that's the biggest risk. I mean, it with AI, um, you know, and again, this is all the way through to, defense tech, right? The only way to fight AI tools is to create other AI tools, right? It's like that's why, that's why you have to be on top of your game, and that's why you have to, in the case of Europe, which for example regulates,
Hmm.
development of AI technologies, is a big problem because of the fact that they're not regulated in Russia and China. And so what you have is,
Yeah.
if you don't engage with artificial intelligence in a Western country, then you can bet on the fact that the adversaries will engage with it, and then you just make yourself weaker. So, and, I mean, we're talking about rent, and we're talking about paying, is the smallest version of that, but it scales all the way to like weapons technology. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've been recently involved. I was recently involved in a kind of property transaction here in the Netherlands. It's more like on the sales side, and it was also done online. Although I met a kind of broker, I met
Yeah.
here. They found a buyer, and all the documents were did online. So. And notary, we have a kind of a notary. Last meeting at notary, so we decide
Yeah.
and then the money goes to seller, and they get a key. So there's a kind of simple for me, but it's not rent. Rent is different. I know I have daughters, my daughter student, and the student she is not able to get to the rent apartment in the city university. Yeah, difficult.
Yeah, I mean, thinking ahead a little bit, obviously we're trying to move everything online, um, and including some of these very high risk transactions when you're talking about, spending millions of dollars potentially. And that's what it boils down to, is how much money is at risk, right? When you're doing a transaction. It's nice to be able to do everything online, but I think because of all this, there's always going to be room for additional security through in-person verification, ID verification. That's what's actually kind of really interesting. Again, I'm kind of diverting a little bit, but if you look at this sort of WorldCoin project by Sam Altman, where they were
Hmm.
scanning the eyeball, you seen that,
Yeah,
around the
yeah,
world they were
yeah.
scanning irises. There's something kind of interesting around this idea that you might go into a physical location and then do a biometric verification of a transaction. That in itself is not very invasive. Like, if it's convenient, right? Like, imagine in the United States, you can go to any pharmacy, right? That's kind of like, in the
Hmm.
United States, you have pharmacies, right? And you have like gas stations. Imagine being able to
Hmm.
go to any pharmacy and gas station and be able to verify through biometrics that you are you, and having kind of a network of that. I think there's something there. Actually, on that note, one of the most exciting companies I think in the United States is kind of a sleeper hit. Is called Clear. Are you familiar with Clear?
Yeah.
They're in airports. So Clear is one of the ways in which you can get through security faster. So,
Ah,
and the way that it works is there's like regular line and then there's a clear line. It's kind of like fast track
oh,
in Europe, but
oh,
fast
yeah.
track in Europe is usually just, oh, it's faster because you're in business class. In the United States, there's faster security means just basically being able to verify identity faster. And so Clear terminals, they just scan your eye, and then you're able to move. through security faster. By the way, the way that you enter the United States now, we have a program called Global Entry, which again, maybe you've heard of
Hmm.
it. But Global Entry just takes a picture of your face, you get through, you don't have to talk to anyone, you don't ever show your passport. In fact, it's possible to get into the United States without a passport just by scanning your eyes now,
Oh,
which is
really?
really crazy. Yeah, but Clear is
Hmm.
now is pretty big. It's a big company that has on record both the fingerprints and the eyes of millions of consumers. And right now, they're only being used to speed up entry into an airport. But there's a world in which you can use Clear to verify a real estate transaction, right? Because all that it does is when you go in there and you scan your eyes, in the system, Clear is able to say, yes, this person came and verified that they are in fact who they are for the purposes of transaction X. And so it's a really interesting space. I mean, I would love to kind of get into it more, maybe in a next startup.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, actually my son now is in New York, and he came there for work for 3 months, but he was not able to get a visa, working visa here in the Netherlands, because there are some lines you have to be about for 6 months before the. But he went
Yeah,
to Curacao in Caribbean,
yeah,
and that was able to do this. So. I don't know. It's kind of difficult. And yeah, I've been last time I've been in the States. I think a few years ago. I don't remember. I went to this quick terminal. I remember some
yeah,
queues. All right.
yeah. I mean, some of that technology is really interesting and has yeah. I guess it's interesting. It's just an interesting thought that like at the forefront of risk are airports. like
Yeah.
like airports are almost in some ways like feel more secure. Well, let's put there's more stuff you have to deal with at an airport than you have to deal with at like a border, right? Like if you're driving by a car, you flash some documents and off you go. But at the airport, you got the full shebang, right? They have to check the documents. They have to verify you're flying somewhere. They have to verify all your belongings. And, sometimes there's a border check there as well. So if you want to look at advances in risk technology, just like look at like a major airport hub and see what they're doing.
Mhm. All right. So, Andrew, I would like to ask you a personal point of view. So, what
Sure.
is the major misconception in the field of fintech or PropTech that space that you can strongly disagree with?
So a common idea that I disagree with.
Yeah, kind of misconception or strong belief, whatever that mainstream belief that you kind of don't agree with.
Oh man, I mean, in some ways, yeah, it depends on who you define as the mainstream. I think that I think that it's probably harder than a lot of people think to find truly good businesses in fintech. There's really a lot of companies, what I call kind of veneer companies. Veneer being that there's a website on top of basically an old company, right? So you take a traditional bank and you give a bank a nice website, and all of a sudden they're a fintech company. Like that's not true.
Hmm.
They're just a bank with a nice website. And in fact, all of the biggest financial institutions in the United States are banks with good websites or good mobile apps, right? Um, so I think what's interesting is truly disruptive, companies in fintech are sort of difficult to spot, um, and it takes a lot to really kind of have the critical mass to really change things
Hmm.
in a big way. In that sense, maybe I'll highlight some companies that are interesting. Um, I mean, maybe if you look at something like Circle,
Yeah,
um, right? So USDC, stable
yeah,
coins,
yeah.
right? Like that's actually like a pretty revolutionary sort of step forward in money movement. And Circle is very big. and they started very small and in this really regulated space. I think what they did was extremely hard. And the implications of what they did and like the use cases around stable coins around the world are just going to continue to grow. It's a total paradigm shift. So now you're
Yeah,
seeing
yeah, exactly.
companies built on top of stable coins that are doing things better, faster. In terms of like moving away from the traditional bank, of the 1950s into the future of finance, I think stable coins is one of the most exciting, truly innovative areas. Um, right? And so, anyways, that's I guess what I'd say is like it's interesting when you look at a company. It's important to look at, okay, the website's great, the mobile app is easy to use, but is there a paradigm shift in the is there a paradigm shift in the underlying operational infrastructure, right? That allows this business to scale exponentially. It's hard to find those companies.
Yeah, yeah. For example, what I use myself, I found Revolut is useful for when you kind of switch some countries. For example, with currency exchange, they kind of they make less fees. And I use Wise. Wise I use for sending payments to some people in the Philippines, and but they initially they were very small fees. Now they are kind of almost the same
Yeah.
as
So a good
big banks.
example of a company also of both connecting stable coins, moving money around the world, and truly revolutionary change is Sling Money. Sling, SLING. And actually, it's interesting I'm bringing them up because they just kind of unveiled themselves a couple of weeks ago, and the demand is. I think their servers are crashing because there's so many people using them. But it's a stable coin based. You wouldn't know it, but it's based on stable coins, lets you move money around the world, literally anywhere, like from Africa to Europe, and then from Europe to South America. It's free or negligible fees, and the transfer speed is instant, and it's all
Oh,
powered by stable coins. It's stable coins on top of
stablecoin.
Solana, if I'm not mistaken. It's a
Oh,
beautiful experience, really beautiful app. I mean, instant money movement around the world at virtually, for virtually no money. And that is it looks like PayPal, so you're like, oh, how is this different? Or it looks like Wise, looks like Revolut, but the way that it's architected is fundamentally different. And you'll see, like if you use the product, it's a total revolution in money movement. I
mm,
think they're gonna be the next PayPal for sure.
well. So both receiver and sender should have a account on USDC or
No,
USDT,
it's like
whatever.
no, no, no. It's you don't have to think about it at all. If you're in the
No?
US, you download the app, you send money from your bank account to a friend in the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands, you don't need the app. You just get a text,
Wow.
and then when you get the text, you just tell it where do you want the money to go. So you could say, okay, put it on this card or put it in this bank account. It's powered by stable coins and powered by Solana, but you would not know.
Wow.
It just looks like it
I,
just looks like somebody sent you dollars, and you got euros.
wow. I will have to try it.
And it's
Huh?
free and instant. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So let's summarize our episode for someone who is listening and would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways. What would it be?
Major takeaways. I mean, first of all, if you're in the United States and you are either paying rent or you're collecting rent, you have a rental property that you collect rent for, check out Rent app. Again, we're free to use, really powerful product, great user experience. You can find us at rent.app. So very, very easy to remember. So it's rent.app is the URL. Um, we work on the web, we work on iOS, we work on Android, whatever you prefer. And yeah, I mean, I think broadly, excited to talk to your audience. I mean, it's a very specific niche. Obviously, all of us have to deal with risk. Companies, live or die by their ability to manage risk. So I'm in the trenches, along with, probably most of your audience as well. If I could be helpful, I could be found at Andrew at rent.app, also easy to remember. And let's go build exciting things.
Absolutely. Okay, Andrew, thanks again, and I hope we will continue our interesting conversation because you're kind of in front forefront of new things in what we will see in the future with all these apps and AI stuff and which will improve our daily life. So that's why all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you something that you think is important to our audience, please go ahead.
No, all good. Thanks for having me. Was
Yeah.
enjoying. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thanks again. And wish you great success with your
Thank you. Appreciate it.
current